You ever been in a situation that you've kind of felt was dangerous? You may have sacrificed your own personal boundaries. In this episode, I want to talk about what's happening as well as what you can do about it in preparation for the next time. My name's Justin Sinceri. I am a therapist, a coach, and the creator of the polyvagal trauma relief system. Welcome to Stuck Not Broken, where I teach you how to live with more emotional freedom without the psychobabble. In this episode, I actually have a special guest with me. It is the best friend of the podcast, Mercedes Corona. She's also a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's a coworker, a good friend of mine, best friend of the podcast. And she actually used to host the podcast way back when. If you dive deep into the show archives, you'll get a heavy dose of Mercedes. She's pretty awesome. I hope you enjoy the episode. So we are going to go into someone from my private community, the Stuck Not Collective, had written just a question for the community, and she wanted people's input. We're going to, you don't know what this is.
I have no idea.
This is brand new to Mercedes. We're going to address this, though, as just like a fictional character. I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to.
Okay.
And of course, this is not therapy, nor is it intended to be a replacement for therapy, unless Mercedes, you intend this to be therapy.
I do not. No,
Okay,
that would be unethical. Yes.
All right. We are on the same page. So this is what I'm going to call her Hilda, okay?
Oh, okay.
This is what Hilda, I don't know why. This is what Hilda says. I'm not sure to ask this, but I'm going to give it a shot. How do others handle when your overactive defensive states expose you to danger? So that's the basic question, but she has some context here for us.
Okay.
Hilda says, yesterday, I was approached by a man in the parking lot at my work, and nothing, quote unquote, bad happened. She said, nothing bad happened. Okay, he cornered me, although I was in no way trapped. We chatted, and he kept pushing for information about me. It may have been innocent, but first off, let's do a PSA here.
Okay.
I'm not in the dating game. I've never really been in it, honestly, in the first place. It seems to me not to be a great idea to try to meet people in a parking lot. It seems to be like the worst possible.
I feel like parking lot is pretty low on the list of places that are ideal.
Parking lots, alleys.
Uh-huh.
I would assume.
Underground garage. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would assume, or levees, maybe.
Just let's put those at the bottom of the list. Levees.
Yeah. Abandoned houses.
Right. Haunted houses. That might be a little higher up on the list.
I could see that happening. Yeah. He cornered me, although in no way trapped. We chatted, and he kept pushing information about me. It may have been innocent, but after he finally left, I felt super exposed and unsafe. He knows where I work and how to contact me. I was reflecting on that and why I react the way I do. And I think this is where people can really, sympathize, or like they can relate on some level. I think a lot of people will be able to relate to this. So I was reflecting on that and why I react the way I do. And if I hadn't been in my defensive state, I would have had the clarity to not give him my number. I don't know if my defensive states are supposed to protect me. They do the opposite, she says. A little bit more. Hilda goes on, I know this has to do with setting boundaries and speaking up for myself and skill sets I do have. But in my defensive state, all those helpful tools are gone. I don't land in flight fight, unfortunately. I freeze, regardless of what level of unsafety I am in, also known as danger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How have others found enough of their safety state to assess danger? I'm working on increasing my access to safety, but how do you access appropriate levels of defense? So what does this boil down to? How do you access safety, but also how do you allow defense and act on it appropriately? To me, it's kind of like the basic idea. It sounds like being stuck in a defensive state for Hilda, it is causing some problems in situations that are relatively safe, or maybe there is a pretty good reason to feel danger, but then it's like too much, maybe, is what she's saying.
Okay. I guess I'm confused about where she's coming from. So she feels like she knows she was safe. And so she feels like in her body, she wanted to feel safer, or she understands that she's in a state of defense all the time. And
It sounds like just a chronic state of defense or easily triggered state of defense. In
so
this
she doesn't like
situation,
that. In this situation, she was in a defensive state and felt like she should have been more safe, like in a more safe state.
that's what I'm thinking. Well, and this is what I'm hearing with this is that she chronically is kind of in a defensive state or easily accessed state. In this
Right.
situation, she's literally safe, but that chronic state of defense was either
Right.
there or like easily triggered. And so now she's like, well, how do I allow a chronic,
Safety.
how do I allow my defensive reaction without getting like sucked into it and freezing? To me, and this is kind of like my first talking point, which is the defensive state shift is super appropriate. You're alone.
That's where, okay, see, that's where a little bit of my confusion is coming from, because it feels like it is appropriate. Because if I'm understanding the situation, the context of it, it was her and a man who is at least somewhat unfamiliar to her in a parking lot.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Do we know the time of day? Is it nighttime? Is it daytime?
No, but that would make a difference too, right?
Were there people around? You know what I mean? But just within the information I gathered, it seems like it's appropriate to be in a somewhat defensive state.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there is at least some level of fairly typical state shift happening. Even if this was me, I'm also like I don't do well with chit-chatting and talking to people. So if a stranger's gonna talk to me, that in and of itself is like I'm gonna shift into more anxious kind of energy. If it's alone somewhere, like probably even more. If it's at nighttime, maybe even more. So I think no matter what sex you are, like that in and of itself, like so there's some things that are just probably common, which is you're alone, you're in a parking lot, so there might not be like a easy access to like getting out of the situation,
or other people to kind of provide other safety.
Yep. So you're alone, no easy escape potentially, strange area. If it's nighttime, it's dark. So there's all these. It seems like we can agree like there's all these like just basic danger cues.
Yeah.
So the problem on that level, actually, I don't know. Would you, in the situation, no matter what the sex is or who it is, do you think you would have some sort of like more of a defensive kind of state shift?
I think so. Yeah. I think gender does have something to do with it. And I don't know how people feel about this, but for sure, I'm aware of the fact that if I'm alone in a parking lot and I'm a female, that's just automatically, there's more chance of being prey to a predator, right? On the other hand, me specifically, and I think you and I have talked about this before, Justin, but me specifically, I am not a petite lady, so even though I am female, I'm 5'9" and I'm solid, like I'm not tiny. I'm not like delicate and I don't have a thin frame. You know what I mean? So I feel like
too.
I used to.
Right.
I do work out sometimes.
Yeah. Hey, look at
past tense. Yeah. So, like if someone looks at me, I don't know that I would a predator, say, out in the wild of a parking lot.
City wild.
If someone looks at me, I don't know that I would automatically be like, oh, this lady, I'm going to take her down, or this one's the one I'm going to, do my whatever thing on. But yeah, I think that definitely comes into effect as far as gender and all of that. Did you say, I've been distracted a little bit, because did you say that she knew this guy before or didn't know him at all? So it's a complete stranger approached her in a parking lot.
That's the way I understood it. But what you're touching upon though, and this is like the first, I want to like lay this foundation, which is there's commonalities. Like you and I might react very similarly in a similar situation, but based on our sex, that's probably going to have something to do with how we react to these things. Based on whether or not we know the person, that's going to affect how we react to these. What time of day, like you've already mentioned these pieces. So the way I look at this is like levels of danger, and there's probably just like we're mammals, so there's probably some commonalities that we all share as mammalian human beings. So like we all are probably going to feel more danger cues or less safety based on what time of day it is, the fact that we're alone, and the fact that it's a stranger. Then you level up. Then you kind of like add the levels of it's a guy. His size probably is going to make a difference as well.
Absolutely.
Prior history of all kinds of stuff, especially including trauma from the person, in this case, the woman in the situation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all these like levels of things, but there probably is some commonality of like,
Yeah.
going into a defensive state totally makes sense. And I'm kind of right there
Right.
with you.
Right.
But then you start adding those things onto it, and it's like, oh yeah, I can
Yeah.
totally see why you're losing access to your safety state.
Yeah. Hilda doesn't give a physical description of herself.
No, nothing more in
I'm just
detail. No.
kidding. I'm just kidding. I think that matters though. I'm just putting myself in that situation. I think that stuff matters. Like if it was another female approaching me, I would automatically feel a little bit safer than if it was a man approaching me. If the man is a little bit smaller statured, I would feel a little bit more safe than if he was like a 6'5", built like a linebacker kind of guy. And I mean, I guess I'm just kind of repeating what you said, but yeah, there's a lot of factors.
There was a situation where we were on vacation at Legoland in the hotel, and they have washer and dryer on the floor. Mm-hmm. And so I took my family stuff over there to do a load, right? But it was after hours, like a few minutes after hours. Like it was like 10:03, and they close it at 10 o'clock or something. And so I'm standing there outside this laundry room, and I saw a mom and her daughter walk toward me. No, nothing dangerous, right?
Right.
But in my mind, probably it is because I'm a guy, or partly because I'm a guy. I'm like, oh crap! They see a strange man standing. I didn't realize it, but I was right outside their door as well. There was a laundry room door and their door, and there's a strange guy who's kind of, I'm tall, kind of big, not super big, but big enough, And I got super anxious. Like I shifted into my defensive state, definitely into more like a flight state. And so I stepped to the side, gave him tons of room. I'm like, sorry, I'm just here waiting for my laundry. Go right ahead. Like I wanted them to know,
right?
You got plenty of
space.
You're
safe. Yeah, that
you're
not a threat.
Yeah. Smiled at him. But my flight energy in situations like that, I get really anxious. I'm like, I don't know, because horror stories and whatnot. I want people to feel safe and comfortable. So, I listen to my defensive activation. So that brings us back to this story, which is there's defensive activation. It makes sense, but how do you listen to it and like use it? And that's really hard. I don't think it's easy. I don't think it's easy. But Hilda was wise enough, smart enough, probably because she's in my courses, Mercedes, probably because she's taking my courses and really getting deep polyvagal knowledge.
Good.
So
yeah.
And by the way, people can sign up for my courses. I have something called Total Access Membership. It's a subscription. They get my courses. They get the community Mercedes. It's a really good opportunity.
Just in case someone's wondering, right? Like
in case they're wondering.
Yeah.
In case they're wondering. So she knows that more access to your safety state has something to do with less defensive activation or being able to at least tolerate it and act in a different way. The second thing I want to bring up here is that when it comes to boundaries, and it's something she had mentioned was, I have boundary skills.
Okay.
Right? She said, I have skills. I know this stuff. So the other thing I want to bring up here is knowing it's great. It's really good. It's a great first step. Knowing how or what to say, knowing your values, knowing who to avoid. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But those things don't do a whole lot unless you can maintain access to your safety state.
Is that where her concern was? Maybe like she knows she has these, let's say, boundary skills, because that's the terminology you used. And she feels like maybe she didn't use them to the most effective level in that moment. Because it sounds like she came out of it safe. Somewhere in the letter, I thought I understood there was some safety there. It wasn't a dangerous situation, but she received enough danger cues.
She said nothing bad happened. She said it may have been,
but maybe like it could have.
Well, nothing bad happened in that moment, but she gave him her phone number, and now he knows where she works and has access to her phone number.
Okay, and so that's her concern, is that she kind of lost touch with her boundary skills because of the defensive state activation. Okay.
Exactly. And now there's someone who has more information about her than she would like. And of course, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the other part of this, was learning these things, phenomenal. But when you're in the situations where defensive states are triggered, your cognitive learning kind of goes to the wayside. I think you lose access to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel badly for her because I think one of
Sure.
the things I've been picking up on in her letter is a little bit of judgment on herself
Right.
as far as like I should have done this. And I don't know that there was those words in the letter, but the feel I got was I should have done something different or I should have reacted a different way. But at the
I
same
think
time it
it's in
sounds
there.
like is it? Okay.
I think it's
It
kind of tucked in there. I think it's tucked
tucked
in there.
in.
Yeah.
Read
Yeah.
between the lines.
Yeah.
I don't know. It sounds like she has a good awareness of when she's in her defensive state. And it's okay, Hilda, if you're listening, it's okay to listen to that. There's a reason for that. And so I guess, I think I say I guess
Yeah.
too much, but I'm just wondering where her distress is because, well, of course, she gave out her phone number and it sounds
Yeah.
like
I think
maybe
it's a
she
big
didn't
part
want
of it.
to, and her work information and all that. Um,
I think it's more like frustration. It sounds
mhm.
like this
Like
character
I shouldn't
Hilda.
have done that. I knew it was
Yeah.
not
Yeah. I think
okay.
so. Yeah. And I think that it sounds like this character, like they have put the work into doing something differently. They wanted a different outcome. So I can see
Yeah.
there being
Okay.
frustration there. Mercedes, I
Yeah.
wonder if you, in your line of work, you work with kiddos.
Yeah.
Do you ever find that you give them all the top down knowledge, but they just don't use the damn skill in the situations where they should be using it?
Absolutely. I find that all the time. And it's a point of frustration for me, not because I'm frustrated with them, but I'm frustrated that maybe I don't know, maybe I'm frustrated with them because I know they have the potential to do it. But
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
coming
yeah.
from a
Not
place of caring, I I try to remember when I'm working with kids, I try to remember that the top down stuff doesn't always work. And so trying to work bottom up
Mhm.
sometimes, is sometimes better. But
Well, I think
yeah,
the
I see
kids
that
you
a
work with
lot.
are very difficult. Like it's not only
Yes,
are they, yeah,
their behaviors are a little bit more extreme than is typically seen in a classroom, in a
yeah,
school environment. And there's a reason
yeah,
for that.
yeah. I mean, they have. They're. I think a lot of them are already traumatized, but then they go home to homes without co-regulation,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so even though you pump them full of all this wonderful top-down knowledge,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean they're going to use it once their defenses are triggered, and that I think happens often. Correct me if I got that wrong.
No, yeah, it does. It
Yeah,
does all the time.
yeah. You shared that you've been doing a lot of running this year, running after the
Yes.
kiddos.
So, I mean, I assume people remember, or maybe I'm new to some people, but
Yeah.
I am also a therapist, just like Justin, and I work for the school district, just like Justin. But my program it's designed to work with children who have more challenging behaviors. And sometimes that means they are running around campus, they leave the area, sometimes they're running off campus. And so, even though I'm a therapist and I do, one on one therapy, how do you feel about that kind of stuff? I also am physically running and chasing after children to
With
maintain
love,
safety with
with love and
love,
compassion.
with love and eye crinkles um, for safety.
God, I would love to see that. Like, how do you
I have some
smile with
tricks.
eye
I have some
crinkles? And
tricks that you'd be
do you?
impressed
Okay.
with. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So far, when it comes to the situation with Hilda, I think we can definitely like validate what she's feeling as far as the
Absolutely.
frustration, for sure. We can normalize the context of it. Makes total sense. I think
Absolutely.
anybody in a similar situation would have some level of defensive state activation, but how much safety state activation do you have really is what determines how you respond to that situation.
Hmm.
The more defensive state you're in, the less access you have to your top-down knowledge, all those things that are maybe just cognitively remembered,
Yeah.
and so you limit the potentials of how you're going to respond are a lot narrower. If you're in a safety
Hmm.
state, you might be able to hold on to. I think you're more likely to be able to hold on to that boundary, and I don't know if there's like a right way to make that sound. Like I don't know if it's the right set of words to give to someone to back off. It's going to sound different person to person. So the way
It
I hold
is.
boundaries will be different than the way Mercedes hold boundaries.
Yeah. And I think whatever works for you is what matters in that moment.
Yeah.
And for sure, it's going to be a process because it sounds like for Hilda, she's working on building those skills and building a stronger safety anchor and stronger access to her safety state. So it's going to take a little bit of time. So maybe at first it's going to sound like the boundary setting is going to sound a little different, or maybe not ideal, however she defines
Right.
that. It's
Yeah.
not going to sound ideal at first, but for sure, just like practicing it in whatever way works best. And then one thing that helps me, because I tend to be a very anxious person, I tend to spend a lot of time down my ladder in kind of a flight state. And what helps me kind of maintain access to my safety state is having like a plan ahead of time. And so that takes a lot of mental work. And there are times where I feel like I don't need it quite as much. I have more access to my safety state. But for example, like if I know I'm going to be in a parking lot, let's just say for argument's sake, it's nighttime. I'm going to have a plan ahead of time. If somebody approaches me, if I feel like I'm getting cornered, like just like scenarios. And it is a very anxious thing to do, but I'm not saying that with judgment. I'm just saying like that's sometimes what I need to kind of manage my own flight state. And then it helps me to access my safety state in that moment. So I've already done this. I've already prepared for this. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm going to say.
So that, to me, that is like allowing a tolerable amount of defensive activations. It's well beforehand though. Mm-hmm. And you're listening to it and you're doing something about it. So that's like one, as far as like answers or what to do next, is listen to your feelings. Actually, let's hold on to that. I'm gonna come back to that in a minute, but that's totally an appropriate way to handle some defensive activation, although it's before the fact, which is probably ideal. I think you mentioned it before, but I wonder if, and not just for Hilda, but for anybody in the situation, can you give yourself some level of, like we did, validation? Can you validate your feelings? Mm-hmm. Can you validate the polyvagal state shifts, and can you validate them as like they're real? This did happen. This is how I felt, and this led to my behavior the way that I addressed the situation. Which is, can you normalize? Can you make sense of why you did what you did without judgment? And that's what you had. Oh, that's what you brought up earlier, was that she was maybe even judging herself. Yeah. Can you do these things without judging yourself? Mm-hmm. So I would definitely invite Hilda to do so. And just a little bit more validation. That's hard to do. It's hard to learn, especially when your defensive states and just whatever your life has been in the past, that those experiences have taught you that judgment is how you're coping with it or how you're responding to it. So it's hard to get out of the habit of judging yourself. But for sure, one of the things that polyvagal theory has helped me with in my own personal life is understanding that this is a biological state that my body is in, and there's a reason for that. And so as much as I can kind of pull away from the judgment and just kind of like allowing like, okay, I don't like it. I don't like how this feels, but there's a reason for it. That has helped me personally to kind of move away a little bit more from that judgment place. Reduce judgment. So Hilda, if you're listening, just remember it's there for a reason. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All these things are, like you said, biological. These evolve within us for a reason. They serve a purpose. And in this situation, it actually did serve its purpose. She did get out of the situation. It wasn't ideal. Right. Wasn't ideal. But she did, get out of the situation. Exactly. Like her response, it sounds like, was a bit of flight activation with shutdown, like immobilization kind of stuff. So there was a freeze, more of a freeze kind of. And she mentioned that in what she wrote, was that there was like a freeze energy to it. So it's not ideal, but hey, look, you got through it. Maybe, who knows? Maybe it could have been a lot worse. Maybe if she had like ran away, this guy would have chased after her. Maybe if she had tried to enforce her personal boundaries, he would have been more aggressive. We have no idea. Right. So if we just look at it as strange person coming up to someone, that freeze response was not ideal. They don't feel proud of it, but look, they got out of it, and they're here looking for more information on how to grow from it. So to me, that's a win, in a sense. Absolutely. She said it may have been innocent. He didn't do anything bad, but there is some sort of freeze. And I really hope people don't judge themselves for that. But let's go back to the situation. Anyone's going to feel some level of flight, I think, some level of anxiety in the situation. Yeah. But even though someone's not like forcing you to immobilize or to stay there, you may perceive that escaping is not possible. So you could totally enter a freeze state because you're already in flight, but then maybe you're detecting or neurocepting that if I make a quick attempt to escape, the situation might get worse. And we have no idea. Maybe not, probably not, but it's maybe within the realm of possibility. Yeah. especially if it's like maybe based on your prior history of trying to escape that made
Mm-hmm.
things worse, or someone got more aggressive when you tried to leave the situation. That could totally contribute to this as well. But maybe there's someone, maybe it was more of a physical thing. We have no idea. Maybe Hilda has some sort of physical limitation. So even though she was activated for flight, maybe she couldn't. Like
Yeah.
she literally just physically could not, and so entered a freeze. It could be, like we said before, maybe there's not a likely escape route. That could totally add to a freeze. There might be cultural norms, familial norms to, be polite, even
Mm-hmm.
with strangers. Like, don't make a scene.
Mm-hmm. Don't be rude.
Don't be
Don't be
rude.
disrespectful.
Exactly. So all those things are
Mm-hmm.
going to potentially keep someone or bring someone into a freeze state. But there also might be cues from like past traumas. And I'm just saying all this stuff because I have it listed. Mercedes is just kind of, you're here. I know I'm going off. I
I
already
assume
had all
this
the
is the
answers ahead of
teaching
time.
part. Yeah.
But there were also contextual. There may be contextual cues. Maybe there was something about that guy that was like just too familiar to something in the past that was, related to like a freeze kind of traumatic incident.
I'm a little bit stuck on that guy right now too. I've been distracted in my mind just thinking like, who are you that you're in a parking lot
That's weird.
relatively alone and you approach a lady who's by herself? Like, what kind of intentions do you have? And like, unless he thinks she's the most beautiful creature in the world, even then though, why would you freak her
Captivating,
out?
mesmerizing,
Captivate,
even then.
enchanting. Maybe you say from a distance, hey, I don't know what. There's no scenario that I can make up in my mind that would make that work, but still, it's just, who are you that you're a man alone and there's a woman alone and you decide that in the parking lot you're going to approach her, she's by herself. It's not okay. I'm laying judgment on this guy.
You are, yeah.
I am.
Maybe it's just he has terrible social, like worse than us, Mercedes. Maybe he's just socially really bad and had the best of intentions. We don't know.
Did you just compare us to this guy?
I said worse than us.
Okay.
Worse than us.
I thought you said just like us. Okay. Good.
No.
Yeah.
Like we said, no parking lots, no alleys,
no
haunted, abandoned homes.
Right. Underground garage.
None of that. So, all right. Let's talk about how to strengthen boundaries. You already said what you brought up before was planning ahead.
And again, just coming from me personally, my personal experiences, I tend to be anxious, so kind of flighty, flight energy. When I plan ahead, it makes me feel prepared, which brings me closer to a safety state. And it makes me feel like if my defensive state is activated, I know what to do. And for sure, that's sort of one of those like top down things. But like I said, like if I'm planning ahead, I already feel safer as opposed to if I'm going into a situation blind without any preparation ahead of time. I'm automatically in that situation much lower on my ladder, closer to that flight place. So that's one of the things that helps me a lot. And I think it does take a lot of energy because you can't plan for everything, right?
No.
You don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but for sure I'll tell myself. So in this situation, I'll tell myself, okay, Mercedes, just kind of scan the environment, make sure you are, you can see what's going on. If it's dark outside, I'm going to make sure to have parked underneath a street light, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is actually going to fit into, I have 6 steps for people. I'll go over them briefly. This is going to fit into number 3. It's going to fit in really well with number 3, I think.
Excellent.
And 4. Yeah. All right. So let's say you've been through something like our friend Hilda did, right?
Okay.
And the first, how do you build stronger boundaries from there? Because it's already happened. It's done. Didn't go ideally, but how do you prepare for the next time? Because there's going to be times in life where you have to enforce the boundary. And that is, let's validate that. Like it is hard. You said that earlier.
Yes.
It is difficult. It's uncomfortable to like kind of like give a little pushback. I've been more protective over my time recently. Thank you for donating your time here as well, Mercedes. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Yeah. So, but it kind of giving that pushback to people and saying no is uncomfortable. That's a simple, personal kind of boundary, but still it's difficult to do these things. So the first thing I would say is validate. We talked about that already. Validate what you went through. Okay?
Yes.
Just acknowledge it's true. Step 2 is normalize it. We talked about that. Does it make sense based on the context? Does it make sense based on the context of your larger life? That's normalizing. Number 3, mindfully allow. If you can do those, validate, normalize, then give permission for those feelings to be there. And you can do that by what Mercedes said was just recognizing I'm already in like an anxious energy or emotion. So instead of ignoring it and just hoping for the best, can I listen to what I feel and take it seriously? So mindfully allow it, actually let yourself feel it a little bit. Number 4 would be to get acquainted, spend some time with it. So let it be there, spend some time with it. And that, again, that's kind of like the Mercedes kind of, if you're imagining what's going to happen, like what could happen, you're allowing the feelings to be there. Because I don't think we don't just think about what's going to happen. We feel it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that thinking about the future for the next time this is going to happen or something similar is going to happen.
And I just want to validate that can be a difficult one to do. This was number 4, right? That can be difficult to do, to just feel the discomfort, to feel these like, ooh, I don't like it, but I think for me, it helps build familiarity with the feeling. And when you're familiar with that feeling, then it actually feels a little bit safer because now it doesn't feel quite so dangerous. I've been through this. I know what this feels like. I know more or less what's going to happen next.
Boom.
Booyah.
I just wanted to emphasize that. Yeah, absolutely.
I like it.
Yeah. So let's go. So step 5 would be praise your body for what it accomplished. Ooh. So you did get to the situation. Give yourself some love. Give yourself some praise. Your body, if you want to say, hey, good job, body. Way to go. We got through whatever it was. Even if it wasn't less than ideal, you got through it. You survived, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So that brings on some safety. I think some safety activation is if you can give yourself some compassion, basically. And then this also goes back to what Mercedes brought up, which is practice your skills ahead of time. Not just think about it, but like kind of role play in a way. If you have a therapist, role play with them if you want to. Look at yourself in the mirror, do a little role play if you'd like to. Practice out what you're going to say or what your face is going to look like maybe if you want. That might help just kind of, it rehearses it. It just makes it a little bit more likely. Yeah. A little more likely that you'll be able to successfully, hold the boundary in the future. Practice with a loved one, maybe a friend. Use your imagination, like you said, Mercedes. If you want to, so that's just like, I think that can help. But if you want to amp it up and make it more pressure filled, maybe set a timer to kind of like, I have to deliver this message in one sentence, maybe. So
that's tough for me. That would help me as far as like a timer just ramps up the anxiety.
How many times have you, maybe this is just me, had to like write an email or text someone with like a little pushback and you kind of just like sit on it and you rewrite it and like,
oh my gosh, it takes me so long, Justin. And I'm not kidding you. Like it takes me a long time because I want to make sure that it's kind of the boundaries, right? Like I want to set and reinforce my boundaries, but I also don't want to cross my own boundaries and be too assertive or too aggressive with it. I want to send across my message without being rude, disrespectful, all those things that we talked about. And if it's a professional email, then, I want to come off as professional and respectful while at the same time saying, hey, this was not okay, or I do not approve of this, or, whatever thing.
You want to pretend to be professional.
Excuse me.
Zing. So
there's no pretending required.
I know. So practice being assertive without making apologies. I think that like if you had to write that, to go back to what you were saying, what if you had to write that email, but you only had 30 seconds? Like that would force you to like deliver your message very clearly and succinctly. What if you had to write that email in one sentence instead of like drawing it out?
That's tougher.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But that's the point is like, can you practice these things with a little bit more challenge so that the next time it rolls around that you'll be able to feel that activation and act on it with more confidence and more safety in your system.
You know what helps too, and I don't know if I should have mentioned this sooner, but something that helps is learning to identify your own feelings, because people are very responsive to that, to a person expressing their feelings. So let's say, back to the scenario in the parking lot, let's say this guy meant no harm at all. Maybe he was simply enchanted by Hilda's beauty and just could not help himself to approach her. But if Hilda can learn ahead of time, this is kind of like the preparing and planning ahead of time, right? If she can learn to identify her feelings and just know how to like kind of say them quickly. Hey, I'm uncomfortable if you're getting too close. I really don't, I feel scared, whatever feels right to say. But people are, People who are receptive to our experiences
Right.
are very responsive to feelings. And maybe maybe he was simply enchanted by her beauty and couldn't see past her sparkle and didn't read the cues of her feeling uncomfortable. But once Hilda says, I'm uncomfortable with how close you're getting,
Yeah.
that might help, a person back off. So learning
Yeah.
to identify your own feelings is a really powerful skill to build.
I can see that as being let's say the first response is she just says, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" Like, and if it doesn't get a good response, she might say, "I'm really uncomfortable with what you're doing right now. Please back off." And so,
Exactly.
yeah, if he's that person that actually has empathy, then he'd be like,
hmm
"Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, you're right. This is weird.
Yeah, I didn't
Let me
realize,
just." Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. But if his motives are not, innocent, then at that point he may advance further or be more aggressive. And at that point, that it would be completely appropriate, I think, to you just leave. You don't have to say anything. You just leave. You
Jam
just
out
get
of
up.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Pedal to the
hopefully
metal, girl.
yeah, right. And you just hope for the
Yeah.
best. That is completely appropriate to do that. So there might be like levels of holding a boundary, maybe you do
hmm
start from safety and you give a nice greeting or whatever, and then set a boundary and then just get out of there.
Hilda, I think it's important to learn to trust yourself, and that can be a difficult process to get to, but it sounds like you have good instincts. So listen to your
Right.
defensive state. And if you're in a defensive state, it's for a reason. So just listen to yourself, listen to your body. It sounds like your instincts are on point. So try not to doubt yourself too much, Hilda. I'm sending you love.
As best you
And it's
can.
hard to trust ourselves. And for sure, past, previous life
Right.
experiences, especially trauma, will definitely have an effect on that, on our ability to do that for ourselves. But sometimes it helps to hear it from someone else. And so try to trust yourself.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I do have a nifty gifty for you, a freebie. It is my SSIEC sheet. This is kind of the perfect thing, I think, for this situation where you're thinking back to something you've been through and you're trying to put new words to it and kind of understand what you went through emotionally, but also in your cognitions, in your sensations, and even in your impulses. And so I created the SSIEC sheet. Stands for sensations. It stands for polyvagal state. So state, sensations, impulses, emotions, and cognitions. Sign up for my email list and you can download the sheet for free and start to connect all these pieces together and gain new vocabulary for yourself and what you've been through. There is a link in the description for the SSIEC sheet, but if you can't tap it right now and you're just listening, it's justinlmft.com/SSIEC, but there'll be a link in the description. This episode was inspired by a comment and question from one of my Stuck Knot Collective private community members. I would love for you to join us. It's a really great little community. Plus, you get access to all of my trauma recovery courses, plus access to Q&As with me live twice a month, plus a whole separate podcast, plus some resources, a whole bunch of stuff. All of it for one subscription. Click the link in the description. If you want to find out more about that, it is justinlmft.com/total access. Again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Stuck Not Broken, and I really hope to see you inside of Stuck Not Broken Total Access.